Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagen. We are back here in Studio 130 in the Central Iowa campus of Iowans for Tax Relief. Back here for another episode of Iowa's favorite conservative podcast. I'm here with John Hendrickson and Chris Ingstad. And how are you doing today, gentlemen?
I'm doing fine.
Really well.
Good. John, you had a trip up north. You came back rested and relaxed and ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, ready to thrill and excite?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Chris, did you do anything fun and exciting since our last episode? Or did you parent and do fun suburban
Probably
Des
more.
Moines things?
Probably more the latter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Well, I do have. We got kind of one main topic to talk about today. We're gonna get to that. It's fun tax stuff. So I would. In our pre-production meeting, which we often go over the issues of the day and get ready to talk, Chris spent most of the time actually on a side project, which was shopping for a new vehicle, right? You're
Yes.
pricing out a
Yes.
Was it a 65?
There were several 65 GTOs
Okay.
that looked real good.
Okay, is that something? Purchase is imminent on that?
It depends if you're fronting the cash. Yes, I am ready to make that move today. But
Good. Is that the dream car? What's the dream classic car that
they're a Buick Grand Sport of the same era.
Very good. John, do you have a dream car?
I don't know.
Or is it that F-150 that's out in the parking lot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a nice truck.
But I only want it if it's got the original like 5-spoke Buick mags. I don't want any custom wheels.
Okay. Yeah. I appreciate that. All stock.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. What I don't even know what mine was. I was kind of thinking about that as I asked the question. So the classic 77 Trans Am with the gold, Firebird on the top of it. I've always been a fan of a 67 Camaro.
Yep.
So those are the two that come to mind. But John, do you have a dream classic? Or I asked you that. What the other question is?
I've always been fond of the cars from the 1930s. They always look neat.
Yeah.
So
You
I think
you know what?
Henry Ford had some good models.
Henry Ford. Yeah. I think you could do that. What
I had him pegged as a Packard man.
What would Herbert Hoover drive, or did he even drive, or did he just retire to the Waldorf Astoria and walk around the neighborhood?
Yeah, I think that's what he did.
Okay. Oh, very good.
Well, there's your project. Your homework
Yeah.
after this is what did Herbert Hoover drive?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go back to West Branch and don't return until you find out.
Hoover strikes you as a man that was driven a lot, not a driver himself. Okay. What I really want to get to before we move on is, John, you have gotten yourself published a lot lately, a lot of different publications, and I think this one that you forwarded us this morning was off of a letter you had to the Dubuque Telegraph Herald.
Yes.
Well, I think in fairness, John's would count as an op-ed or an opinion.
John's was an op-ed. This was sort of the nasty 2 cents worth response to John's article on fiscal conservatism.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
did you enjoy this, or
I did.
did it hurt your feelings?
No,
it didn't.
No.
Okay, so I was actually kind of surprised that they published this reader's name and address, which I thought was kind of odd.
Yes.
But whatever.
You know what? Good for the person for
she's
putting their
proud.
name on it.
But we'll leave it at this is Mary from Macokota. But in responding to John's, it's short enough. I think we can read a lot of it. Obviously, it starts with "Oh, good grief, Mr. Hendrickson." So, but fiscal conservative might be fine sometimes, but what Kim Reynolds and her minions have done to the cities and counties of the state is almost immoral. I might offer a response that what cities and counties have done to the taxpayers of the state is often immoral, but whatever. Please introduce me to the counties who are thrilled to be hogtied by the restraints forced on them by the legislature. Okay, so let's start there. The restraints that have hogtied cities and counties. Chris, do you want to help me out? Do you want to take a stab at that?
I do not. I don't. First of all, the state can do whatever they want to the cities.
Correct.
They exist because the state allows them to exist. And frankly,
yes,
that moves the other direction in that the federal government exists because states allows it to exist.
Exactly.
Also. But we'll skip past the civics lesson here and go, the sort of restraints that I assume she's talking about is the state coming on and saying, like, you can only have a reasonable rate of growth in what you're doing. Because cities and counties so far are finding way too many ways to separate taxpayers from their money. And make no mistake that what has been put on top of them that she is calling hog ties is limiting their growth. Okay, yeah. It is slowing down the rate at which they can take money right out of your pockets. And frankly, I think most Iowans are in favor of slowing down the growth of government tax and spending.
Unless she means that they're hogtied by actually having to do more to tell their citizens how much more they want to spend. Maybe that's the other one, John.
That's right. Yeah.
I got a notice in the mail this week, as hopefully a lot of listeners did. Right, I think 3/4 of the state has a bond issue, one or another, coming up next month, and it said here's how much they want to take and here's what they want to use for it. I think that's fantastic. Now I have at least a very baseline knowledge of the issue before I walk in there and have to cast a yes or no vote for what is literally hundreds of millions of dollars in new debt for my community. Correct. I think that's wonderful that you actually have to tell tell the taxpayer what you might do and how much it's going to cost.
Here's the one that I'm struggling to get past, John. So since you are the author of the underlying op-ed, you're going to have to help
defend it, John.
Me and the listeners out. Mary says, "Please help us guess." So we're actually going to answer Mary's question here for her. Please help me guess which cities will be unable to exist because the state of Iowa refuses to let them make their own decisions.
Yeah.
I think the answer is... John seems a lost word. I think the answer is none. I don't think any cities will go away.
Or hopefully a whole bunch of them. Or I mean, I don't even know what this is. And so, I put you too much on the spot. What are we talking about? Unable to exist?
Yeah, it's similar to the some of the news articles we've been seeing recently where some cities are basically threatening cuts to fire and police as a result of this. And then, again, it's just over the top rhetoric of basically some people out there thinking that cities and counties should have a blank check.
It's because those local governments have continued to turn a deaf ear to their citizens, to their voters, to their taxpayers. And so then those taxpayers are forced to take their concerns to their legislators who come to serve in Des Moines. And the legislators, fortunately, are responsive to that. And they put in some new reforms that say cities and counties, you guys got to slow this down a little bit. You got to be a little more transparent. You can't just keep taking more and more.
I would like to
If the cities and counties don't like it, they need to be responsive to their people.
I have yet to hear from a local official what their solution is to this property tax problem, regardless of political party. I've not heard of a county supervisor or a city councilman or a mayor address that issue. They've all provide excuses, and I don't know if this is right or fair, but I call it a blame game. And these local governments, they blame each other, they blame the legislature, and they just keep
still blaming the assessor, by the way.
Nobody takes ownership of the problem.
Or they tell you that there really isn't a problem, that you should pay it and you should be happy because you get all the wonderful stuff they provide, and you should be thankful.
Yes.
That they are building you a new aquatic center. And you should be thankful that you now have a place to play pickleball, and you should be thankful for all of the stuff that they do to make your life better. That's what I hear. Yeah, or that you just don't understand.
That's right.
Or they want to lecture you that you don't understand city budgets, John.
And that actually happened to me. I was at a breakfast meeting, and I had, and this was a couple of years ago, but I had a city manager lecture me, and basically said that you don't know anything about city budgets.
You're right, but the way that you govern tells me you don't know anything about a household budget.
That's the underlying point, is that we have Mary here who is far more concerned about city and county budgets and what's best for them, and that if some small, modest rate of growth isn't enough, and not worried about the budgets of taxpayers in this state who are suffering under the yoke of Joe Biden's economy.
Look, the facts are not in the favor of the local government apologists. The facts show statewide. Now, community by community, there could be communities who are doing a great job.
And there are, and we've said that.
Mary may live in a good one, and then good for her and good for the local leaders there. But by and large, the amount of tax, the amount of property tax dollars we're paying across the state has far exceeded a number of reasonable growth measures. So let's stop with saying that we're unreasonable for wanting to slow down the growth.
And so we arrive at the point that you made a minute ago, Chris, and what Mary says, because the state refuses to let them make their own decisions.
The state has to step in when you're not managing yourself correctly.
They're stepping in because you're not making the decisions, because you're just spending whatever, growing it beyond. Iowans are mad and they're frustrated. They know that they pay too much in property tax. This isn't a left, right, conservative. They're just upset. And the only people that seem to be listening to them, at least in decision makers' hands, is the state legislature, which is trying to be responsive to them. Is there more they can do? Absolutely. They'd be the first people to concede that. But there is far more we can do. And so, apparently, at least somebody's listening to the concerns of cities and counties, so that's fine. But thankfully, Iowans and our state legislature are trying to do something about it. So, wow. Okay. Was that enough, John?
Yeah.
Do you feel better?
Well, I the other thing I would just want to mention is that this article was really kind of upholding what I would say the gold standard of state budgeting, which has been done by this legislature and our governor, and I think she used the word stingy and
Stingy and soulless?
something like that. Yeah, I forget.
Selfish
and stingy.
Well,
And one is that, first of all, the priorities are being met. And of course, there's going to be people out there that will always say that things are underfunded. But I would just, respond to Mary by saying, look at Iowa in comparison to some other states. And we have seen time and time again, whether it's the federal government or even states that just continually to tax and spend. And look at Iowa's fiscal condition versus Illinois or California. If the progressive playbook of tax and spend worked, then California would not be in the situation it is today. Same with Illinois or New York or any of those. And look at what's happening to our neighbors to the north, Minnesota, which is they continue to follow the old tired progressive playbook of tax and spend, and they're losing population, and their fiscal house is being slowly eroded as a result. And our governor has really done an excellent job, and I don't think she gets enough credit for being very conservative, very prudent on the budget, and that was the focus of that article. And I think it's a fantastic policy, and it's sort of a segue into what we'll talk about next. But that has allowed us to do some very good policies in response, because it all starts with a good budget.
Well, I'm going to close this with this. Fiscal conservatism is selfish. It's my money. It's not selfish to want to keep more of your own money. It's mine.
That's right.
The money does not belong to government. It just shows that they think it all belongs to them, and they're just going to allow you to keep a little bit of it.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay, it's not selfish. It's mine. All right, moving on, John. So something that we have referenced many times on this show and in some of the things that we write about is the Tax Foundation annual rankings, the state business tax climate, where it's really a very good snapshot of where the states rank in their tax policy. So anyway, we've got the new, I believe it would be the 2024 version, and shows progress, which we've said we were going to make. So, John, give us the 50,000-foot view of this year's Tax Foundation State Business Tax Climate Rankings.
Yeah, well, they came out, I believe, this morning, and it's always exciting because Iowa used to be in the top 10 worst.
Sometimes we call that the
bottom 10. Yeah. But now we've moved to 33 out of 50. Last year we were 38, and that's the overall ranking. And so we keep improving because of the pro-growth tax policies that have been made since 2018. And so, for example, the Tax Foundation ranks individual categories. So they rank corporate tax, individual income tax, sales tax, property tax, and unemployment insurance tax. And so on the corporate side, we're 29th in the nation. In the individual side, we're 22nd. Sales tax, we're 15. Property tax is not so good. We're 41, which, we've been talking a lot about the problem we have in property tax. Then unemployment insurance tax is 32. And so what we're seeing here is that over the last several years, we've done a lot of good things on the tax front. And, and so we're scheduled to have a flat 3.9% tax by 2026. And so our rankings are only going to improve. Our corporate rate has fallen already. And so that new corporate rate isn't factored into this report. So I think in those rankings, we're just only going to get better here. And this matters because, as they say, tax rates matter.
Yeah.
And tax competitiveness matters. And so as states have, in the last few years, I think unprecedented levels of tax reform have occurred the last several years. And as we talked about a lot of times on this show, Iowa's led the way in that. And, and what I would say is the most transformative tax reform in national history. At one time we had 13 income tax brackets, if you think about it. Now, by 2026, we'll have one flat tax, and that could even be lower, depending on what the legislature does next session. So we've made some tremendous progress on the tax front. And Chris, you guys did, and you were a leader on 2018 bill that broadened the sales tax base and sort of started this whole process of reducing income tax rates. I think that was that was a key bill and sort of a crucial kickoff for all these important reforms.
Yeah. Chris, I know you looked at they actually talk about Iowa in the write-up here about notable changes in the index. So the authors actually take note of Iowa, mentioning some of the things that John alluded to, but a few other things. Do you have anything that kind of jumped off of the page at you, maybe just thematically about this or where things are going directionally?
Yes. I think this is the first year that we got some significant personal and corporate income tax cuts. So some of those cuts that are phasing in are actually now accounted for in the ranking, and I think that's why you saw some major progress on the individual and the corporate side. And as they also note, and John alluded to, there's additional changes yet to come that aren't even factored into the score.
Correct.
So you look at those things, and we're moving in the right direction on corporate and individual, and we're now kind of in the middle as opposed to a bottom 10. But back to the issue we started on, property taxes. Property taxes is one area we actually took a step back this year, and we remain a bottom 10 state on property taxes. So with all respect to Mary and her input, we objectively are still a bad state for property taxes, and that's why that's going to keep up. The thing that I thought was, you say thematically, Chris, for a number of years, our overall ranking was 45 or 46, so we were stuck in that bottom 10, and then we started crawling out. We went from 45 to 42 to a couple years at 38, and now in at 33 with more improvement yet to come. So I think that's the testament of what's been done. As John said, good tax reform is an evolution, not a revolution, and you see that in our slow and steady progress up the rankings that we believe is going to continue.
If I'm not mistaken, it was the largest. No, there was one other state that climbed the rankings, Mississippi, and us, but for whatever reason, and those are the two big climbers.
Yeah, and just to point out, in 2022, Iowa and Mississippi were the two states that had the most significant. Well, I would say we even did better than Mississippi, but those Iowa and Mississippi were the leaders of the state flat tax revolution in 2022. And overall, though, when you look at this index, the two states that have made the most improvement over the years have been Iowa and North Carolina.
Yeah.
Both, I would say, are the gold standard examples for how to do state tax reform.
I think it's important to note too that this, okay, so we're at 33 this year. That doesn't reflect the sum of the tax reforms that have been done up to this point. And you both have mentioned
reflects
that.
only the ones that have been implemented.
Right.
And we know the best is yet to come on those cuts.
we've still got quite a ways to go of the implementation of the 2022 tax bill.
Yep.
And so, and we had this conversation. The principal author of this, Jared Walczak from the Tax Foundation, we had a conversation with him. Like, okay, I know it's impossible to predict what your rankings look like in the future, but we're going to keep climbing quite a bit. He's like, oh, absolutely. Whatever. But I think if memory serves, like we could look forward to, depending on what other states do, possibly climbing into the top 20 here. But
John, it's sort of, and again, you can't do this, but in a vacuum, if everybody else just stayed where they were and we implemented all of our phase-in changes tomorrow, was that like 12, 13, 15 somewhere?
Yeah, it was somewhere around there.
Yeah. So quite good and a lot of progress that's coming.
But as John's talked about, it's not static. There are other. This is a race for competitiveness.
Absolutely.
And other states are seeing, as you've pointed out time and again, Iowa being the model. They're chasing Iowa.
Yes. Yeah.
And so other states are going to reform their tax code. It doesn't look like it's going to be Oklahoma right now.
No.
But
no.
And you have an article about that too.
Did we talk about that?
We talked about it happening, and this was sort of a big deal, and maybe we have a little bit of time to touch on this. It's like, what did happen in Oklahoma? While these states are chasing us, they came up short. What happened?
Well, there was the governor, as we talked about, called a special session, and basically the day of the special session, if I remember right, October 3rd, the Senate adjourned that day, which killed the special session, and they had two goals in that special session, two main goals, I should say. One was budget transparency. The other one was income tax, and with placing their income tax on a path to elimination. One problem that stood out was that the governor and the House were on the same page, but it didn't appear that there was a plan. There was several House bills that had been introduced, and the Senate basically said, if we don't see a plan, we're just going to adjourn, and that's what happened. And so you had Republicans who control that state, but you had Republicans in the Senate joined together by Democrats to vote to adjourn and kill the special session. Their argument was that the governor did not provide a blueprint. Now, that can be debated because certainly some Republicans in their state Senate and the House basically said they didn't give the process time to work. Which is true, but
did the governor call that? In Iowa,
yes,
it can be the governor or the General Assembly can call it. It was the governor that called it?
Yes.
Okay. I would think that my guess is there's some behind the scenes back and forth between the governor and those two caucuses.
You think?
Yeah, but I tend to agree with the folks that are frustrated that you called them back for a special session without having a plan, or at least a good outline of a plan.
Or frankly, that you didn't get the buy-in and charged ahead anyway.
That's right. So what was... There had to be some other angle that somebody was playing to put them on the spot, or, well, okay, I'll show you. We'll come back in. But special sessions are rare. At least they are in Iowa. We did not have a single one in my 12 years in the legislature. Now there have been 3 since then, but 2 of those were for redistricting and in really odd circumstances. So it's rare, and seems to me you don't come in and do that unless you know you've got it all put together.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that was on the table is that Oklahoma, just like Iowa and many states, have large surpluses right now, and so that surplus is creating temptations for spending. And that was also a factor in this, is that some, I think, in their legislature wanted to basically, instead of cutting income taxes, they saw that as an opportunity to spend. We're seeing this in Colorado. They're going to have a vote on an amendment, basically, that I would say is kind kind of some smoke and mirrors, basically promising property tax relief in exchange for gutting their Tabor.
Colorado is going to do some short-term taxpayer giveaways.
Yeah.
At the expense of some long-term taxpayer.
Yeah. And they have what's called the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which is the strongest state spending limitation across the nation. And I think if they approve this, and for the, it's going to gut Tabor and it's going to ratchet up spending.
I feel like Chris is ready to sign off here, so I want to sum up the two things you just said. Colorado's a great illustration of the danger in taking some short-term benefit at the cost or expense of a real long-term protection. Okay, so I think for Iowa's lawmakers and Iowa's leaders, whatever you're going to do on tax policy, make sure you take the long game. Keep that in mind. Don't fall for some short-term gimmick or giveaway. Okay, that's number one. Number two, in Oklahoma, special sessions are unique. Probably wasn't ready for prime time. They shouldn't have done it. But it is important that when you've got a major initiative that you want to undertake, you don't have to be synced up on the actual bill or the legislation. In fact, it's probably good if the different parties, meaning the different folks involved, have maybe some different thoughts. And that's okay to collaborate on. But you need to be synced up about what that final goal is. And I think it's illustrative that a state like Oklahoma, which people probably think of Oklahoma as more red than Iowa.
I think by some metrics over the last 10 years has been the
sort of the
reddest
conservative
state in the
standard.
union. Yeah.
And they couldn't get this done with unified conservative control, which tells me it's just all the more remarkable what Iowa has actually been able to accomplish, not once, but 3 different times now on major income tax reforms. And frankly, the fact that a number of legislative leaders and the governor herself keep talking about more progress is really, really good and really unique. I'm optimistic about this. I'm excited about it. But it's going to be hard work because, as Oklahoma showed, it is not a slam dunk.
It is not, and I think that I have several thoughts on that. One is we should be very appreciative of how synced up the leaders have been on getting these things done. They have not agreed on every single piece of every single bill, but they have gotten there. They have gotten there.
Nobody walked away from the process like they did in Oklahoma.
And it appears that those leaders continue to be working that direction as well. Governor Reynolds has spoken about this. Senator Whitver has talked about it. Speaker Grassley is talking about it, of going further for no other reason that we continue to collect these giant surpluses. But I mean, make no mistake, as much as we are aligned, at least at a leadership level in Iowa, to secure additional taxpayer wins, it's going to be difficult. And I caution all of the folks out there. We have gotten so many wins on so many fronts in the conservative movement in Iowa over the last several years. Long may it continue.
Don't take it for granted.
Don't take it for granted. It is difficult. And it should be difficult.
Yes.
You want it to be difficult to pass a law, any law. Mm-hmm. You want it to be very difficult to pass the big. Folks in Colorado, or at least those that care, probably hope that it's really difficult to pass this trade-off for their Tabor. But at the same time, be thankful and appreciative that we have a lot of support. There's a lot of energy behind doing what we believe is the right thing to do, which is continue to better align revenue and spending and let Iowans have that selfish desire of keeping more of the money that they've earned. Yep. So that's what I have to say about that. And we will see to the long game, we will see it. There will be objective data that shows just how far we have come and how far we're going to continue to go.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Went a little overtime, but I think it was worth it. Don't you, John?
I do, yeah.
Good. All right. Well, that is a little bit more than the time that we have for today. So appreciate you joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with your friends. And a special for those of you that are still with us, make sure you know what's going on in your local community. You have a bond election coming up. You have city and school board elections coming up. Make sure you are engaged in that process. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.